Picture this. It's Halloween night. Autumn leaves falling. A carved pumpkin glowing on someone's porch. And somewhere, someone is dressed as the Headless Horseman. Black cloak, fake horse, carrying a plastic jack-o'-lantern under their arm. The Headless Horseman is as much a part of American Halloween as witches and vampires. He's in cartoons, in movies, on decorations, in theme parks. Disney made him charming in 1949, a comical villain chasing a goofy schoolteacher through painted autumn scenery while Bing Crosby narrated. Tim Burton made him terrifying in 1999, a vengeful ghost controlled by a witch, decapitating his way through a gothic mystery starring Johnny Depp. Everyone knows the Headless Horseman. Everyone knows Sleepy Hollow. Everyone knows Ichabod Crane. But almost no one knows the real story. The original, The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, was written in 1820 by Washington Irving. And it's nothing like what you see at Halloween. This is not a story about a hero fighting evil. There is no hero. Ichabod Crane is not a charming underdog or a brave investigator. He's a greedy, superstitious schoolteacher who wants to marry a rich man's daughter, not because he loves her, but because he wants her inheritance. This is not a story where good triumphs over evil. It's a story where a man vanishes on a dark road and no one ever finds out what happened to him. Was it a ghost? Was it murder? Did he die? Or did he run away? Washington Irving never tells us. He gives us clues, he gives us theories, and then he leaves us with a mystery that will never be solved. The ambiguity is deliberate, it's brilliant, and it's what makes this story far more sophisticated and far more disturbing than any adaptation has ever captured. Before we descend into the haunted valley of Sleepy Hollow, I want to ask you something. If you believe these classic tales deserve to be remembered in their original forms, if you believe we should understand the real stories behind our most famous legends, you can help by liking this video and subscribing to the Midnight Archives. Your support allows us to keep exploring the darkness that lives at the heart of our most beloved stories. Tonight, we travel to a glen in the Hudson Valley of New York, just after the Revolutionary War, a place the Dutch settlers called Sleepy Hollow, a place where ghost stories are told by every fireside, where the boundary between legend and reality has dissolved, where the most famous spirit in American folklore rides through the darkness searching for his severed head. We will meet Ichabod Crane, a man whose greed and superstition will lead him into the night. We will meet his rival, Brom Bones, a local tough guy who wants the same prize. We will meet Katrina Van Tassel, the daughter of the richest man in the valley, the inheritance both men are competing for. We will attend a party where ghost stories are told and warnings are given. We will ride through haunted woods where every shadow might be death on horseback. We will witness a chase that ends with a hat, a shattered pumpkin, and a man who is never seen again. And we will ask the question that has haunted readers for 200 years. What really happened to Ichabod Crane? This is not the Disney cartoon. This is not the Tim Burton film. This is Washington Irving's original tale, the birth of American Gothic horror. This is the legend of Sleepy Hollow. Welcome to the Midnight Archives. In the bosom of one of those spacious coves which indent the eastern shore of the Hudson River, there lies a small market town. The old Dutch settlers called it Tarrytown, perhaps because the men liked to tarry at the tavern on market days, or perhaps for some other reason, lost to time. This is the 1790s. The Revolutionary War ended only 15 years ago. The conflict is still fresh in everyone's memory. Veterans walk the streets. Widows wear black. The landscape itself bears the scars. Burned buildings, overgrown battlefields, graves marked and unmarked. About 2 miles from Tarrytown, there is a glen, a little valley among the hills, a quiet, drowsy place where the world seems somehow slower, where the air hangs heavy with something between mist and magic. The Dutch called this place Sleepy Hollow. It's an apt name. There's something about Sleepy Hollow that makes people drowsy, dreamy, given to visions and fancies. Some say it's the geography, the way the hills cup the valley, the way mist settles and lingers. Others say a German doctor bewitched the place during the early days of settlement, placing a spell that has never lifted. Whatever the cause, Sleepy Hollow is haunted. Not metaphorically haunted, not quaintly atmospheric, actually haunted, the most haunted place in all of America. The Dutch settlers who first came to this valley brought old world superstitions with them, beliefs in spirits and specters, in the restless dead and the malevolent invisible. And the valley's isolation preserved these beliefs long after other communities had rationalized them away, dismissed them as peasant folklore, moved into the enlightened modern world. But Sleepy Hollow never modernized, never rationalized, never stopped believing. Every family had ghost stories, not stories they'd heard from others, but personal encounters, things they'd seen with their own eyes, heard with their own ears, experienced directly. There was the woman in white who haunted Raven Rock. People saw her on moonlit nights, standing at the cliff's edge, looking down into the dark water below. Some said she was a bride who threw herself from the cliff when her lover betrayed her. Others said she was a witch, executed in the old country, whose spirit followed the settlers across the ocean to continue her revenge. There was the shrieking woman heard near the bridge, a sound like grief made audible, like all the sorrow in the world compressed into a single wail. People hurried past that bridge after dark, not wanting to hear it, not wanting to know what pain could produce such a sound. There were phantom soldiers from the Revolutionary War, Continental soldiers marching through the woods at night, still fighting battles that had already been lost or won, still dying deaths they'd already died. The war was recent enough that these weren't ancient legends. These were men whose names people knew, whose families still lived in the area, whose graves were fresh. But of all the spirits that haunted Sleepy Hollow, one dominated the others. One ghost was spoken of more than any other, feared more than any other, seen more than any other. The Headless Horseman. He was a Hessian trooper, one of the German mercenaries hired by the British to fight in the Revolutionary War. Professional soldiers, well-trained, experienced, feared by the Continental Army for their discipline and ferocity. This particular Hessian had been a cavalry officer, a man who lived on horseback, who rode into battle with saber drawn and death in his eyes. During one of the battles near Sleepy Hollow, a cannonball took his head clean off. One moment he was riding, alive, fighting. The next moment his head was separated from his body by a sphere of iron moving faster than sound. His body stayed in the saddle for several seconds before toppling to the ground. They found his head 20 yards away, still wearing its helmet, eyes still open. They buried him in the churchyard. The old Dutch church at the edge of Sleepy Hollow, with its ancient gravestones and moss-covered walls. He was buried without ceremony. Enemy dead don't get eulogies. Just a hole in the ground and a marker with no name. But he didn't rest. Every night when the church bell tolls midnight, he rises from his grave. His body climbs out of the earth, still wearing the uniform he died in. He mounts a massive black horse. Some say it's the same horse he rode in life, also killed in the battle, also buried in unhallowed ground, also unable to rest. And he rides through Sleepy Hollow at tremendous speed, his horse breathing fire, hooves striking sparks from the stones in the road, rides with desperate urgency, searching, always searching, searching for what he lost, searching for his head. He cannot speak, he has no mouth, he cannot see, he has no eyes, but somehow he knows, somehow he senses the living, and when he encounters someone on the road after dark, he pursues them, chases them, hunts them. There is one place of safety. A wooden bridge crosses a stream just before you reach the church. If you can make it to that bridge, you're safe. The horseman cannot cross running water. It's an old superstition, one the Dutch brought with them from Europe, and it holds true even for spirits. Cross the bridge and the ghost must stop. He'll rage at the water's edge, but he cannot follow. But if he catches you before you reach the bridge, the stories differ about what happens then. Some say he takes your head to replace his own, though the replacement never works, and by morning he's headless again. Some say he drags you back to his grave in the churchyard, down into the earth, into darkness forever. Some say he simply kills you, that being caught by death incarnate means your own death is sealed. Multiple witnesses over the years had seen him. Old people, young people, skeptics, believers, men riding home from the tavern, women walking back from visiting neighbors, children who stayed out too late playing, all of them describing the same thing: a massive figure on horseback, headless, pursuing them through the darkness. Some escaped by reaching the bridge. Others barely survived the encounter, arriving home white-faced and trembling, never quite the same afterward. This was not folklore from the old country, safely distant in space and time. This was not a legend about something that happened long ago to people whose names no one remembered. This was American. This ghost was born from American soil, American war, American violence. The battles that created him had been fought on these roads, in these woods. The grave he rose from was right there. You could visit it if you wanted, though most people didn't. The Headless Horseman was real. Everyone in Sleepy Hollow believed this with absolute certainty, and that belief is where our story really begins. Near the church, near the graveyard where the Hessian was buried, stood a schoolhouse. It was a low building of one large room. The windows were partly glazed, but where glass was missing, the gaps had been patched with pages from old copybooks. On cold days, these paper patches fluttered in the wind. The door was secured not with a proper lock, but with a withe, a twisted branch that could be opened by anyone who knew the trick. It was a poor place for a poor community, and it had just received a new school teacher, a man named Ichabod Crane. His name was Ichabod Crane. Washington Irving gives us a physical description that borders on cruel. He wants us to see Ichabod clearly, every awkward, ungainly, ridiculous inch of him. Ichabod was tall, very tall, but thin to the point of emaciation. Exceedingly lank, Irving writes, with narrow shoulders, long arms and legs, hands dangling a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels. He had a small, flat-topped head that sat atop a long, scrawny neck, huge ears that stuck out like handles, large, glassy green eyes that bulged slightly, and a long nose, sharp and pointed like a bird's beak. When he walked, all these parts moved independently, arms swinging, legs striding, head bobbing, creating an effect of pure discoordination. To see him striding along the profile of a hill on a windy day, Irving writes, with his clothes bagging and fluttering about him, one might have mistaken him for the genius of famine descending upon the earth, or some scarecrow eloped from a cornfield. That's the image we're meant to have. A collection of sticks and cloth animated by unlikely magic. Not quite human. Comical, awkward, almost pitiable in his ungainliness. But Ichabod was also educated, and in rural 1790s New York, education meant something. It meant status, opportunity, a path out of poverty. Ichabod could read, write, cipher. He knew things the farmers and their children didn't know, and that knowledge was valuable. He came to Sleepy Hollow as the new schoolteacher. The position was not prestigious. Schoolteachers in rural America were barely above servants in social standing. The pay was minimal. The respect was conditional. But it was employment. His teaching philosophy could be summed up in a single phrase from the Bible: spare the rod, spoil the child. He ruled through fear and physical punishment. When students misbehaved, and by Ichabod's standards, almost everything counted as misbehavior, he struck them with rulers, with switches, with his own bony hands. He believed that learning required pain, that discipline required violence, that respect must be beaten into young bodies. The irony was that Ichabod himself was constantly afraid. He moved through the world in a state of low-level terror, convinced that danger lurked everywhere. But he transferred that fear onto his students, becoming the thing he himself feared, an arbitrary, unpredictable source of pain. Outside the schoolhouse, though, he was different. Friendly, helpful, eager to please. He knew his position was precarious, knew he depended on the goodwill of the community. So he made himself useful to the farmers whose children he taught. He helped with light work, nothing too strenuous for his scarecrow frame, but enough to show willing. He gossiped with the mothers. He played with the younger children. He also boarded with his students' families. This was part of the compensation, room and board in addition to the meager salary. But it meant Ichabod never had a home of his own. He lived 1 week here, 1 week there, rotating through the households, carrying all his worldly possessions in a single cotton handkerchief. Books, an extra shirt, some small personal items. That was everything he owned. He was rootless, dependent, one step away from destitution at all times, and he was desperate to change that. 2 traits defined Ichabod Crane's character, 2 obsessions that shaped every decision, every action, every thought. The first was greed. Ichabod was consumed by desire for wealth he didn't have. His eyes would light up, those bulging green eyes, whenever he saw a prosperous farm. He would stop whatever he was doing to stare at rich land, well-maintained buildings, fat livestock, and his mind would immediately start calculating. How much was that farm worth? What could it be sold for? If someone owned that land, what could they do with the profits? He would stand there, mentally inventorying everything. The acres of wheat, the orchards heavy with fruit, the sleek cattle, the sturdy barns, adding it all up in his head. imagining it converted to cash, imagining that cash in his own pocket. And then his imagination would go further. He'd picture himself selling everything, the land, the buildings, the equipment, every last asset, converting the entire farm into liquid wealth, taking that wealth and moving west, to the frontier where land was cheap and opportunity was endless. He'd buy more land there, cheaper land, more of it, build an empire. This was the American dream in its most naked, acquisitive form, the dream of social mobility through accumulation, the dream of escaping poverty through cleverness and ambition. But Ichabod had no capital, no inheritance, no prospects, just a schoolteacher's meager salary and a sharp eye for other people's wealth. So he needed a shortcut. He needed to marry money. The second defining trait was superstition. Ichabod Crane believed absolutely in the supernatural. He was an avid reader, unusual for his time and place. One of his favorite books was Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft. This was not fiction. This was a supposedly factual account of witch trials, demonic possessions, and supernatural encounters in colonial New England. Written by a Puritan minister who helped orchestrate the Salem witch trials, Ichabod believed every word. Witches were real, demons were real. The devil walked the earth in various forms, tempting and destroying human souls. The invisible world of spirits pressed against the visible world of matter, and the boundary between them was thin, permeable, dangerous. He loved hearing ghost stories, loved the thrill of supernatural tales told by firelight, but he also terrified himself with them. After an evening of ghostly narratives, he would walk home through the dark, absolutely convinced that every shadow was a spirit, every rustling leaf was a demon, every snapped twig was something coming for him. His imagination transformed the landscape around him. That twisted tree, it looked like it had a face, like it was watching him. That large rock, it looked like a crouching figure waiting to pounce. That sound in the bushes, something was definitely following him. He would try to maintain his courage by singing psalms. The 23rd Psalm was a favorite. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. But his voice would tremble, would crack, and the singing only made him feel more vulnerable, more alone, more aware of the vast darkness pressing in around him. Ichabod Crane was a walking contradiction, educated but superstitious, rational in his calculations but irrational in his fears, cruel to children but obsequious to adults, ambitious but powerless. He was both pitiable and contemptible. We feel sorry for him. He has so little, wants so much, lives such a precarious existence. But we're also disturbed by him. He beats children, schemes for inheritance, reduces human relationships to financial transactions. We're not sure if we want him to succeed or fail. We're not sure if we like him or despise him. We're not sure what we hope will happen to him. And that uncertainty is important, because when Ichabod Crane vanishes, when he disappears into the night and is never seen again, we won't know how to feel. Is it tragic? Is it deserved? Is it simply the inevitable result of his own character flaws? Washington Irving refuses to make it simple. Now let's meet the prize Ichabod is reaching for, the woman who will, directly or indirectly, lead him to his doom. About half a mile from the schoolhouse stood one of the most beautiful and prosperous farms in the entire region. Its owner was Baltus Van Tassel, a wealthy farmer, content and well-respected, the kind of man who had succeeded in the world without apparent effort. His farm was magnificent, acres of rich land, perfectly maintained, barns bursting with harvest, orchards heavy with fruit, livestock sleek and well-fed. Everything about the place radiated abundance, security, comfort. When Ichabod Crane first saw this farm, his mind immediately began working. He didn't see the beauty of the landscape or the skill of the husbandry. He saw value, wealth, opportunity. Washington Irving describes Ichabod's thought process in language that borders on grotesque. Ichabod looks at the farm and sees roasted pigs walking around with forks and knives stuck in their backs, ready to eat. He sees fat ducks pairing themselves off in serving dishes. He sees geese swimming in their own gravy, rows of pigeons baking in pies. He's not seeing a farm, he's seeing a feast. Not agriculture, but consumption. Not a living, working enterprise, but wealth that could be liquidated, sold, converted to cash and carried away. And then he began calculating what it would all be worth. If someone owned this farm, if someone married into this family and inherited this land, what could they do with it? Sell the livestock, sell the equipment, sell the land itself. Take the money and move west, buy cheaper land, more land, build an empire. The fantasy consumed him. He stood there staring at Baltus Van Tassel's prosperous acres and dreamed of owning them, of selling them, of becoming wealthy and important and never having to depend on anyone again. And then he met Katrina Van Tassel. She was 18 years old, young, fresh, in the full bloom of youth. Irving describes her as plump as a partridge, which in 1820 was meant as a sincere compliment. She was rosy-cheeked, healthy, conventionally beautiful by the standards of her time and place. She had a reputation as a little of a coquette, meaning she loved attention, enjoyed being admired, flirted with everyone. She wore the best clothes her father's money could buy. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had never wanted for anything. Most importantly, she was Baltus Van Tassel's only child, his sole heir. When he died, everything, the farm, the land, the livestock, all that accumulated wealth, would pass to her, and to whoever married her. Did Ichabod Crane love Katrina Van Tassel? No, absolutely not. He loved what she represented. He loved the inheritance she carried. He loved the escape from poverty she offered. But Katrina herself, as a person, as an individual with thoughts and feelings and desires, was completely irrelevant to him. Irving makes this brutally clear. When Ichabod looked at Katrina, he didn't see a young woman. He saw the farm. He saw the wealth. He saw his future transformed. His fantasies about her were economic, not romantic. Marriage was a business transaction. Love was beside the point. But Ichabod knew how to play the game. He was a social climber, skilled at making himself useful and charming. So he began courting Katrina, not openly, not formally, but subtly. He offered to give her singing lessons. He made himself available to help her family with small tasks. He appeared at social gatherings where she would be present. He pretended to share her interests, to enjoy her company, to find her fascinating. And Katrina seemed receptive. She smiled at him. She accepted his attentions. She let him court her, at least informally. But there was a problem, a significant problem, a rival. Abraham Van Brunt, known universally and exclusively as Brom Bones. Brom was everything Ichabod was not. Where Ichabod was tall and thin and awkward, Brom was tall and broad and powerful. Where Ichabod was weak, Brom was strong. Where Ichabod was educated but poor, Brom was less educated but comfortably wealthy. Where Ichabod was an outsider, Brom was local elite. Irving describes Brom's physical presence in terms that suggest barely contained power. He had a Herculean frame, muscular, imposing, the kind of build that made people step aside when he entered a room. He had black curly hair, a handsome face, and the confidence of someone who had never seriously doubted himself. He was the leader of the young men in the area. When there was a horse race, Brom won. When there was a test of strength, Brom won. When there was a fight, and there were fights, because this was rural 1790s America, where violence was a form of entertainment, Brom won. He rode a fierce horse named Daredevil that no one else could control. The horse was as powerful and as confident as its rider. A massive animal with a wild streak, dangerous in the wrong hands, but perfectly matched to Brom. And Brom Bones was also courting Katrina Van Tassel. Now, when Brom showed interest in a woman, his rivals typically had the good sense to withdraw. They recognized that competing with Brom Bones was pointless. He would win. He always won. Better to step aside gracefully than to be humiliated publicly. But Ichabod didn't withdraw. Either he was too stubborn or too greedy to give up. The Van Tassel fortune was too valuable, the prospect of escaping poverty too tempting. He couldn't just walk away, no matter how intimidating his rival was. Brom was frustrated by this. Under normal circumstances, he might have simply beaten Ichabod up, made it physically clear who the superior man was, who deserved Katrina's attention. But Brom couldn't do that. It would be beneath his dignity to physically assault a schoolteacher. He was local aristocracy. Ichabod was essentially a servant. Beating him would make Brom look like a bully, would turn community sympathy toward Ichabod, would potentially hurt his chances with Katrina. So Brom turned to mockery and pranks instead. He taught a dog to whine in perfect imitation of Ichabod's psalm singing. The dog would follow Ichabod through the streets, whining and howling in that distinctive nasal tone, while people laughed. He stopped up the schoolhouse chimney one cold morning. When Ichabod tried to light the stove, the room filled with smoke, choking the students, ruining the day's lessons. He broke into the schoolhouse one night and turned everything upside down. Desks overturned, books scattered, general chaos that Ichabod had to clean up, while students and parents whispered about whether the schoolmaster could even maintain order. He made Ichabod the subject of jokes. He spread rumors. He questioned Ichabod's masculinity, his courage, his worth as a potential husband. But Ichabod wouldn't leave. He endured the mockery. He cleaned up after the pranks. He kept courting Katrina, kept offering singing lessons, kept making himself present in her life. And Katrina seemed to enjoy it. The competition, the attention, having two men fighting over her, one strong and local and confident, one educated and ambitious and desperate. Was she genuinely conflicted about which man to choose? Was she considering both as serious prospects? Or was she just enjoying the power? The coquette playing with her admirers, keeping both interested, committing to neither, watching them compete for her favor. Irving suggests the latter. Katrina was toying with them, enjoying her moment of maximum desirability, the brief window when she was young and sought after, and able to make men do ridiculous things for the chance of winning her. But for Ichabod and Brom, this was not a game. For Ichabod, this was his one chance to escape poverty. For Brom, this was about pride, territory, maintaining his position as the dominant male in the community. The rivalry was reaching its peak. One of them would win Katrina and her inheritance. The other would lose everything. And the resolution was coming soon. On a fine autumn afternoon, Ichabod Crane received an invitation. Baltus Van Tassel was hosting a quilting frolic, a combination work party and social gathering. The women would quilt, the men would socialize, and in the evening everyone would feast and dance and tell stories. It was exactly the kind of event where Ichabod could advance his courtship, where he might even propose to Katrina if the opportunity arose. This was his chance, his moment, everything he'd been working toward. He spent the entire day preparing. He gave his students a half holiday, unusual for him, but he needed time to make himself presentable. He brushed his only suit until it shone as much as worn fabric could shine. He borrowed a horse from Hans van Ripper, the farmer whose house he was currently boarding at. The horse was named Gunpowder, and Gunpowder was not an impressive animal. He was old, ancient really, a former plough horse, now semi-retired because he could barely work anymore. He was gaunt, his ribs visible through patchy fur. He was shaggy and unkempt. One eye was blind, just a clouded white orb that saw nothing. The other eye had the gleam of a genuine devil in it, as Irving writes, a mean, knowing look. Gunpowder moved with broken-winded labor. Every step was an effort. His head hung low, his back swayed, and Ichabod Crane on this horse was pure comedy. All those long, gangly limbs folded awkwardly in the saddle, elbows jutting out, knees sticking up, his feet nearly dragging on the ground, his small flat head bobbing on top of that long, scrawny neck. The whole assemblage looked like a locust mounted on a grasshopper, as one observer later described it. But in Ichabod's mind, he was magnificent. He was a gentleman riding to claim his bride. He was on the verge of winning the greatest prize in Sleepy Hollow. He was about to change his life forever. He rode to the Van Tassel farm as the afternoon sun slanted golden through the autumn trees, arrived as guests were gathering, tied Gunpowder to a fence and entered the house. The place was full of people, local farmers and their families, the prosperous and the struggling, all gathered together. And there, among his gang of friends, sat Brom Bones, watching, waiting. But first, the feast. This is one of the most famous passages Washington Irving ever wrote. He describes the food at Baltus Van Tassel's table in such loving, sensual, obsessive detail that you can practically taste it 200 years later. The tables were loaded with autumn abundance. This was harvest season, the time when farmers celebrated the year's success, when barns were full and there was enough to eat and winter seemed far away. There were platters of meat, ham sliced thick, still glistening with glaze, smoked beef, dark and rich, roasted chicken that fell off the bone. There were pies, apple pies, still warm, crusts flaking at the touch, pumpkin pies, dense and spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg, peach pies dripping with sweetness, custard pies smooth as silk, there were cakes and pastries, donuts, fried to golden perfection, sweet cakes layered with cream, preserved plums glistening like jewels, gingerbread, honey cakes, crullers dusted with sugar. There were cookies of every kind imaginable, shaped like stars and animals and geometric patterns. And there was tea and coffee and cider, liquid refreshment to wash down the solid abundance. Why does Irving spend so long describing the food? Because this is what Ichabod sees when he looks at Katrina. Not a person, but a meal. Not romance, but consumption. Not love, but acquisition. The food represents the wealth Ichabod is trying to marry into. Every dish on that table is a symbol of the Van Tassel fortune. Every bite represents the escape from poverty he's pursuing, and he ate enormously. Remember, Ichabod was usually half-starved. He lived on whatever his boarding families were willing to feed him, which was often not much. He was always hungry, always aware that his next meal was uncertain. So when confronted with this abundance, this shocking, almost offensive display of wealth transformed into edible form, he attacked it. His eyes rolled in his head with delight and greed. He piled his plate high, ate it all, piled it high again. He consumed with a desperate intensity that made some of the other guests uncomfortable. He was embarrassing himself, but he didn't care or didn't notice. All he could think about was the food, the wealth, the possibility that all of this could be his if he just played his cards right. After the feast came dancing. The furniture was pushed back. Someone produced a fiddle, and the guests began to dance. The country dances popular in rural America, where couples formed lines and moved through patterns, where everyone participated, and the main goal was energetic fun rather than elegant grace. Ichabod Crane prided himself on his dancing ability. He thought he was good at it, thought he was impressing Katrina. He was not good at it. He was, in fact, terrible. All those long limbs flailing independently, elbows jerking, knees pumping, his whole body moving with enthusiastic discoordination. He looked like a marionette operated by someone having a seizure. Other guests had to dodge to avoid being struck by his flying appendages. But he didn't realize how he looked. In his mind, he was graceful, he was charming. He was demonstrating to Katrina and her father and everyone present that he was a man of culture and refinement. Katrina danced with him, smiled at him, seemed to enjoy his company. Meanwhile, Brom Bones sat in the corner brooding. His usual confidence was shaken. Katrina seemed focused on Ichabod. She wasn't paying attention to Brom, wasn't laughing at his jokes or responding to his attempts to get her attention. Brom tried to show off with feats of strength, lifting heavy objects, arm wrestling, demonstrating his physical superiority, but no one cared. Everyone was watching the dancing. As the evening progressed and the dancing wound down, the guests began gathering for a different kind of entertainment. The old men, the veterans, the storytellers, the ones who remembered, settled into chairs and began to talk. They started with Revolutionary War tales, personal memories of the conflict that had ended only 15 years earlier, battles they'd fought in, close calls they'd survived, friends they'd lost, the capture of Major Andre, the British spy and traitor, whose execution was still fresh in everyone's memory, featured prominently. Major Andre had been captured not far from here, had been tried, convicted, and hanged for treason. His ghost was said to haunt the spot where he'd been taken. These were recent history, living memory, things that had happened to people in this room or to people they knew. And then the stories shifted. from history to legend, from what definitely happened to what might have happened, from documented events to supernatural encounters, tales of Sleepy Hollow's many hauntings, the woman in white at Raven Rock, the shrieking woman near the bridge, the phantom soldiers still fighting their Revolutionary War battles in the darkness. Every family contributed a story. Every guest had something to share or had heard something from someone reliable. But all the stories eventually came around to the same subject: the Headless Horseman, the Hessian trooper who lost his head to a cannonball, the ghost who rides every night searching for what he lost, the spirit who pursues anyone he encounters on the dark roads. Everyone had an encounter to report, or knew someone who did. The evidence was overwhelming, mounting, impossible to dismiss. And then Brom Bones spoke. He claimed, and his voice was loud enough that everyone in the room could hear, including Ichabod, that he had once met the horseman himself. He'd been riding home late one night on Daredevil. The road was dark, and suddenly there was someone behind him, someone on horseback, riding fast, gaining on him. Brom turned to look and saw the Headless Horseman. No mistaking it. No head on the shoulders, the shape unmistakable even in darkness. So Brom did what Brom Bones would do. He challenged the ghost to a race, and they raced. Through the dark woods, along the haunted roads, hooves pounding, both horses running at full speed. Brom was winning. Daredevil was fast, the fastest horse in the region. They were pulling ahead. They reached the bridge by the church, the place where the horseman is supposed to stop, unable to cross running water. And just as they crossed, the horseman vanished, disappeared in a flash of fire, gone like he'd never been there at all. Brom told this story while staring directly at Ichabod, his eyes locked on the schoolteacher, his voice confident, knowing. Was it a true account? Was Brom describing something that actually happened to him? Or was he sending a message? A warning? A threat? Was he telling Ichabod, "I know about the ghost. I know these roads at night, and you should be very, very careful if you try to ride home alone after dark"? Ichabod, listening, grew pale. His face lost color. His hands trembled slightly. He tried to laugh along with everyone else, tried to pretend he wasn't affected, but he was affected, deeply affected, because Ichabod believed every word of every ghost story he'd ever heard. The Headless Horseman was real. Everyone in this room seemed to agree on that. They'd seen him, or their fathers had seen him, or their neighbors had seen him. And now Ichabod was going to have to ride home, alone, at night, through the most haunted parts of Sleepy Hollow. He was terrified, and everyone in the room could see it. The party began to break up around midnight, guests departing in groups, calling goodnight to each other, heading off into the autumn darkness. But Ichabod lingered. He needed to speak with Katrina privately. This was his moment, his chance to propose, to secure the future he'd been dreaming of, to claim the Van Tassel inheritance and escape poverty forever. He drew Katrina aside. They spoke alone, in private, away from the other guests. What happened during this conversation? Washington Irving never tells us. This is one of the story's most crucial ambiguities, one of the deliberate gaps that Irving refuses to fill in. We don't know what Ichabod said. We don't know what Katrina said. We don't know if he proposed, or if she rejected him, or if something else entirely happened. All we know is what Irving shows us. When Ichabod emerged from this private conversation, He looked desolate and chapfallen, defeated, disappointed, devastated. His face was pale, his shoulders were slumped. The confidence and excitement that had animated him all evening had drained away completely. He looked like a man who had just lost everything. Something had gone very, very wrong. Did Katrina reject his proposal? Did she laugh at his presumption? Did she tell him she had already chosen Brom Bones? Did she toy with him one more time, refusing to commit, keeping him dangling? Or did she do something else? Something we can't even guess at? We'll never know. Irving made sure of that. What we do know is this: Ichabod's hopes were crushed. There would be no marriage to Katrina Van Tassel, no inheritance, no escape from poverty, no prosperous farm to sell and convert into westward-bound capital. He had gambled everything on this courtship, and he had lost. He walked out to the fence where gunpowder was tied, climbed onto the old horse's back with none of the confidence he'd felt earlier, and rode away from the Van Tassel farm, into the darkness, into the night, into the most haunted parts of Sleepy Hollow, alone. It was after midnight, the witching hour, the time when the boundary between the living world and the dead world is thinnest, when ghosts walk and demons hunt, and nothing is as it should be. The moon was up but not consistently visible. Clouds kept passing over it, moments of silver light where you could see the road ahead, then deep darkness where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. Ichabod Crane was alone on the road. The warmth and light of the Van Tassel party already felt distant, like something from another world, like a dream he was waking from into nightmare. He was entering a different realm now, the realm of shadows and superstition, the realm where all the ghost stories he'd heard that evening might prove to be true. And every one of those stories echoed in his mind. The Headless Horseman riding at tremendous speed, hooves striking sparks from the stones, the woman in white standing at cliff's edge, the shrieking woman whose wail could drive you mad, the phantom soldiers still fighting their Revolutionary War battles in the darkness. All of it rushed through his consciousness, each story reinforcing the others, building a case for the supernatural that felt irrefutable. Everyone believed these things. Everyone had seen or heard or experienced something impossible. How could they all be wrong? The landscape itself seemed hostile. The trees loomed like giants waiting to grab him. Their bare branches reached toward him like skeletal fingers. The shadows between them were impossibly deep, impossibly dark. Anything could be hiding there. Every sound was magnified in the silence. The creak of the saddle, gunpowder's labored breathing, the crunch of hooves on the dirt road, the rustle of dead leaves blown by wind, the snap of a twig somewhere in the darkness. That last sound made Ichabod's heart race. What broke that twig? An animal or something else? He tried to calm himself by singing psalms. The 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. But his voice quavered, trembled, cracked on the high notes. The singing made him feel more alone, not less, made him more aware of how small he was, how vulnerable, how utterly dependent on divine protection if anything out here wanted to hurt him. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. But he did fear evil. He feared it absolutely. Every shadow was evil waiting to pounce. Every darkness concealed evil planning its attack. He passed through increasingly ominous territory, landmarks he recognized from the ghost stories. First, the spot where Major Andre had been captured, the British spy and traitor, the man who tried to betray West Point to the enemy and was caught, tried, and hanged. This spot was considered extremely haunted. Multiple people claimed to have seen Andre's ghost here, walking the road he'd been captured on, reliving the moment of his downfall again and again for eternity, and towering over this spot, a massive tulip tree. One of the largest trees in the region. Its trunk was so thick, 3 men couldn't reach around it. Its branches spread out like a vast canopy, blocking the moonlight, creating a pool of absolute darkness beneath. Locals said you could hear sounds from that tree at night, groaning, creaking that wasn't just wind in wood, but something more organic, more pained. The souls of the hanged, maybe. Ichabod's fear mounted with every step. His heart was pounding now, his hands gripping the reins so tightly they hurt. Gunpowder sensed his rider's terror and grew skittish, nervous, ears flicking back and forth. Ahead was the stream. The stream crossed by the wooden bridge. The same bridge from all the stories. The bridge the Headless Horseman cannot cross. If Ichabod could reach that bridge, he'd be safe. Running water would protect him. It was an old superstition. Ghosts cannot cross flowing water. Cross the bridge and the ghost must stop. But first he had to get there, and between here and the bridge. In the shadows ahead, something moved. Ichabod stopped Gunpowder. The old horse came to a grateful halt, head hanging low, breathing heavily. Ahead in the darkness, something. A shape, a presence. Something huge and black and utterly still. Ichabod's heart hammered in his chest. His throat went dry. His hands started shaking. What was it? A tree? A large rock? Just a shadow cast by the moon? It wasn't moving. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe his imagination was just creating monsters because he was terrified and alone. He started to breathe again, started to feel foolish for his fear. He kicked Gunpowder gently, urging the horse forward, and the thing moved. It stood up, revealed itself as what it was. Not a tree, not a rock, not a shadow, but a figure. A massive figure on horseback. Black, silent, enormous in the darkness. Ichabod tried to call out, tried to speak, to identify himself, to ask, "Who are you?" But his voice failed. Came out as nothing more than a whisper, a croak, a sound that died in his throat. The figure didn't respond, didn't move again, just sat there on its horse, motionless as a statue. Ichabod kicked Gunpowder into a faster walk. Not running, not yet, just moving away from this thing. The figure began to move, matched Ichabod's pace exactly, riding parallel to him now, side by side on the road. Ichabod sped up. The figure sped up. Ichabod slowed down. The figure slowed down. It was following him, deliberately, staying with him, matching his every move. Ichabod's terror was complete now. His rational mind shut down. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he couldn't run yet, because he still didn't know what this was. So they rode together, 2 horsemen on a dark road, one terrified, one silent, moving through the shadows with only the sound of hooves for company. Ichabod tried to sing again, tried to keep his courage up with psalms, but the words wouldn't come, just fragments. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." They passed through a patch of moonlight, and Ichabod saw, really saw. The figure beside him was a horseman, enormous, dressed in dark clothing, sitting ramrod straight in the saddle with perfect military posture, and headless, no head on the shoulders. The neck ended in a stump, but there was a head, not on the shoulders where it should be, but carried, resting on the pommel of the saddle, a severed head, positioned carefully like a precious object, and it was facing Ichabod. This was the Headless Horseman, and he had found Ichabod Crane. Ichabod kicked Gunpowder as hard as he could, kicked him with both heels again and again, desperate. The old horse responded. Some reserve of strength appeared, fear transmitted from rider to animal. Gunpowder ran, not fast by any objective standard, but faster than he'd run in years. Behind them, the sound of pursuit, the horseman following, his horse's hooves pounding the road with a rhythm that was too fast, too regular, too much like a drum beat. The sound was getting louder, closer. The horseman was gaining on them. The road was terrible, dark and rutted and dangerous. Ichabod couldn't see where he was going. Gunpowder stumbled once, twice, nearly threw his rider. Ichabod lost his stirrups. His feet came out of the supports and dangled uselessly. He clung to Gunpowder's neck with both arms, face pressed into the horse's mane, holding on for his life. His long legs were flying. His coat was flapping behind him like wings. His elbows were jerking with every movement. He was all awkward angles and desperate motion and pure terror. Behind him, the pounding of hooves, getting closer, closer, so close now he could hear the horses breathing. The bridge. He remembered the bridge. If he could reach it, he'd be safe. The horseman cannot cross running water. He looked ahead and saw it. The wooden bridge, just visible in the moonlight, just a little farther, just a few more seconds. The hoofbeats behind him were almost on top of him now. The horseman was right there, right behind him. They reached the bridge. Gunpowder's hooves thundered on wood. The sound changed from the dull thud of dirt road to the sharp crack of impact on planks. They were crossing into safety. Ichabod dared to look back, to see if it had worked, to see if the horseman had stopped as all the stories said he would. The horseman was not stopping. He was rising in his stirrups, standing up, his massive form looming even larger against the darkness. He was reaching for something, his hand moving to the severed head that rested on his saddle. He lifted it, raised it high, the head in his hand like a weapon, and he threw it. The head flew through the air, spinning, tumbling, dark against the darkness, coming straight at Ichabod with terrible accuracy. Ichabod saw it coming, couldn't move, couldn't duck, could only watch. It struck him. The impact was tremendous. Not the glancing blow of something light, but the solid strike of something heavy and hard. It hit him in the side of the head with enough force to knock him completely out of the saddle. Ichabod tumbled from Gunpowder's back, fell through space, hit the ground. Agony exploded through his body. His head bounced on dirt and rocks. Colors flashed behind his eyes, and then the colors faded, and there was only darkness and silence and nothing. Morning broke over Sleepy Hollow with golden autumn light. Birds singing, sun warm, the world restored to rationality and order. Hans Van Ripper, the farmer Ichabod had been boarding with, the man who owned Gunpowder, was up early to do his morning chores. And as he walked out toward his barn, he noticed something. His horse was back. Gunpowder was grazing peacefully near his usual spot by the gate, calm, content, showing no signs of distress. But the saddle was wrong. It had turned completely under the horse's belly. Hung upside down, the stirrups dragging in the mud, the whole assembly trampled and filthy, but no sign of Ichabod Crane. Van Ripper checked the barn, the house, the nearby fields, called Ichabod's name. No response. The school teacher was gone. Word spread quickly. By mid-morning, search parties had formed. Concerned citizens, parents of Ichabod's students, curious neighbors. They followed the route Ichabod would have taken home from the Van Tassel farm. The road was easy to track. The ground was still damp from recent rain. And there in the mud, they found hoof prints, 2 sets. One they recognized as belonging to gunpowder, the distinctive worn shoes, the slightly irregular gait of the old horse. And another set, much larger, much deeper, as if from a heavier horse carrying a heavier rider. The 2 sets of prints ran parallel for a while. Then they began to show signs of pursuit, the prints becoming more frantic, more chaotic, long strides that suggested running. The tracks led to the bridge, the wooden bridge over the stream, the bridge by the old Dutch church. And there, on the ground near the bridge, they found Ichabod's hat, the distinctive battered felt hat he always wore, lying in the dirt, crushed, and beside it, a shattered pumpkin, not a severed head, not a skull, not anything supernatural, just a pumpkin, smashed to pieces on the ground, orange flesh and seeds scattered across the dirt. The thick shell cracked into fragments. The searchers stared at these items, hat and pumpkin, physical evidence that told a story, but not a complete story. They searched further, looked for a body, searched the stream, the woods, the churchyard, checked abandoned buildings and anywhere a body might be hidden or might have fallen. Nothing. No sign of Ichabod Crane. No blood, no torn clothing, no physical evidence of violence beyond the smashed pumpkin and the fallen hat. He had vanished completely. The search continued for days. The community refused to give up easily. They organized systematic searches. They dragged the stream. They combed through the woods. Nothing. Eventually, they had to accept that Ichabod Crane was gone. Whatever had happened to him that night, he was not coming back. His belongings at Hans Van Ripper's house were examined, searched for clues. There wasn't much. A few books, including his beloved copy of Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft. Some clothes, his psalm book, small personal items. Nothing valuable. Nothing that suggested he'd been planning to leave. Nothing that explained his disappearance. The schoolhouse stood empty. His students waited for a teacher who never returned. Eventually, a new teacher was hired. Life moved on. And then, shortly after Ichabod's disappearance, Brom Bones and Katrina Van Tassel announced their engagement. They married soon after. A big wedding, well attended, celebrated by the entire community. Brom settled into comfortable life as a wealthy farmer, living the life that Ichabod had been scheming to claim. They seemed very happy together. By all accounts, it was a good marriage. Children came. Life went on. But people noticed something odd about Brom Bones. Whenever someone mentioned Ichabod Crane's disappearance, whenever the subject came up in conversation, Brom would laugh. Not a polite chuckle, not a sad shake of the head, but a real laugh, a knowing laugh. And he laughed especially hard at the mention of the pumpkin. The shattered pumpkin found beside Ichabod's hat. Brom thought that detail was hilarious, would laugh until tears came to his eyes. Why? Why did he find it so funny? What did he know that others didn't? People talked about it, speculated, developed theories. The community divided into two camps, two interpretations of what had happened that night. Theory 1. The Headless Horseman was real. The ghost exists. Multiple witnesses over many years have seen him. The Hessian trooper really does rise from his grave every night and ride through Sleepy Hollow searching for his severed head. Ichabod Crane encountered him that night on the road. The horseman pursued him, threw something at him, the pumpkin perhaps. Or Ichabod saw the pumpkin in his terror and thought it was the horseman's head. The impact killed him, or the shock killed him. Or the horseman took him somewhere, dragged him to the churchyard, pulled him down into the grave. Ichabod is dead. He died of supernatural causes. The victim of Sleepy Hollow's most famous ghost. Theory 2. Brom Bones committed murder. Brom had motive. He wanted Katrina Van Tassel and her inheritance. As long as Ichabod remained as a rival, Katrina might choose him. He had to be eliminated. Brom had opportunity. He was at the party. He knew Ichabod would be riding home alone that night. He knew the route Ichabod would take. He could have left early, set up the ambush, waited on the road. Brom had means. He was an expert horseman. He rode Daredevil, a large and powerful horse. He could easily have chased down old gunpowder. He had the physical strength to throw a pumpkin with enough force to knock a man from his horse. The pumpkin itself is suspicious. Where did it come from? Someone brought it there. Someone threw it at Ichabod. And Brom's story at the party, about racing the horseman, seems like rehearsal, like he was setting up an alibi, establishing that everyone knew about the ghost, that if Ichabod disappeared, people would assume supernatural causes rather than murder. Brom threw the pumpkin at Ichabod. The impact either killed him or knocked him unconscious. Then Brom hid the body. He knew the area intimately, knew places to conceal a corpse where it would never be found. Perfect murder, disguised as a ghost story. The rival eliminated, the path cleared. And Brom laughs at the pumpkin detail because it's his private joke, his secret triumph, the proof that he got away with it. Both theories make sense. Both theories have evidence supporting them. Both theories explain the facts. And Washington Irving never tells us which is true. He gives us the hoof prints. But heavy hoof prints could be from a warhorse or from Daredevil. He gives us the pumpkin, but a pumpkin could be thrown by a ghost or by a murderer. He gives us Brom's laughter, but that could be guilty knowledge or just satisfaction. The ambiguity is deliberate. The uncertainty is the point. Years after these events, Washington Irving includes a postscript to his tale, a final ambiguity. An old farmer from Sleepy Hollow travels to New York City. While there, he hears people telling the story of Ichabod Crane and the Headless Horseman. The old farmer listens for a while. Then he interrupts. "I can tell you what really happened," he says. And he tells them, Ichabod Crane didn't die. He survived the encounter on the road, whatever it was. But he was so terrified, so humiliated, so utterly defeated that he couldn't return to Sleepy Hollow. He'd lost Katrina. He'd lost his position. He'd been scared half to death. He couldn't face the community again, so he left, fled to another part of New York, and he studied law. He became a lawyer, then a politician, then a judge, lived prosperously for the rest of his life, built a successful career in a place where no one knew his story, never returned to Sleepy Hollow, just disappeared into his new identity and let the old Ichabod Crane become a ghost story. Is this true? Irving doesn't confirm it. He just reports what the old farmer said. And the old farmer is described as someone known for telling tall tales. Someone whose relationship with factual accuracy is flexible, so we can't trust him, which means we're left with 3 possibilities. 1. Ichabod died, killed by a ghost or by a murderer. 2. Ichabod survived and fled, rebuilt his life elsewhere. 3. Something else entirely happened. The truth is unknowable, lost to time, to legend, to the fundamental impossibility of recovering what really happened. And that unknowability is what makes this story brilliant. The legend of Sleepy Hollow is not really about whether ghosts exist. It's not really about whether Brom Bones killed Ichabod Crane. It's not even really about what happened on that dark road in 1820. It's about stories, about how narrative shapes reality, about how legends are created and spread and believed until they become more real than the truth they've replaced. Washington Irving is asking fundamental questions. How do we know what we know? We weren't there. We didn't see what happened. We're depending on accounts from people who have their own biases, their own interpretations, their own reasons to lie or embellish or misremember. How do we distinguish between what actually happened and what people say happened? Between facts and interpretation? Between events and the stories told about events? Can we ever really know the truth? Or is truth always just the most convincing narrative? Several themes emerge. The power of belief. Ichabod Crane believed in ghosts absolutely, and that belief may have killed him. Not because ghosts are real, we don't know if they're real, but because belief shapes how we perceive reality. When Ichabod saw something on that road, he saw a ghost, because he believed in ghosts. His belief determined his perception, and his perception led to his disappearance. Whether the thing he saw was actually supernatural is almost beside the point. The unreliability of narrative. We're told this story by someone who heard it from someone else. It's passed through multiple retellings. How much has changed? What details have been added or lost? We can't trust any of it completely. Truth has been lost somewhere in the layers of retelling. The birth of American mythology. This is crucial. Irving is creating American folklore, not borrowing from European traditions, but making something new from American materials. American landscape, the Hudson Valley, American history, the Revolutionary War, American anxieties, class mobility, social climbing, the frontier. The Headless Horseman is an American ghost, born from American violence, haunting American roads. Class and social mobility. Ichabod Crane is a poor man trying to marry into wealth. He's pursuing the American dream, the idea that anyone can rise. But he fails, spectacularly, and the existing social order is preserved. The local elite, Brom, marries the local heiress, Katrina. Wealth stays within wealth. Is this a critique of the American dream? A suggestion that social mobility is a lie? Irving doesn't tell us, but the question hangs there. The dark side of ambition. Ichabod wanted something desperately, was willing to scheme and manipulate in pursuit of it. His desire consumed him, and his ambition led him to ride alone through a haunted valley on a dark night, led him to vulnerability, led him to his fate. The American dream becomes the American nightmare. Why does the ambiguity matter? If the horseman is real, it's just a ghost story, scary but contained. The supernatural exists, operates by certain rules. If Brom committed murder, it's just a crime story. Disturbing but comprehensible. Human evil, human motivations. But by refusing to choose, by leaving both possibilities open, Irving creates something much more powerful. He creates uncertainty that can never be resolved, a mystery that will never be solved. Truth has been lost, replaced by legend, and the legend has become more real than truth ever was. Washington Irving was born in 1783 in New York City. He died in 1859 at his home in Tarrytown, the very town adjacent to Sleepy Hollow. The Legend of Sleepy Hollow was published in 1820 as part of a collection called The Sketchbook of Geoffrey Crayon, Gent. It was one of the first works of American literature to gain international recognition. Europeans read it and were impressed. America could produce literature, could tell stories, could create art. More importantly, it was one of the first truly American works. Before Irving, most American writing imitated British models. Irving changed that. He created something distinctly American. The story's enduring power is remarkable. 200 years after publication, it remains one of the most famous American tales. Every October, millions celebrate Halloween with images of the Headless Horseman. The story has been adapted countless times. Disney made an animated version in 1949. Charming, colorful, playful. Ichabod became sympathetic. The horseman became a comical villain. The ambiguity was removed. It was clearly Brom in disguise. Tim Burton made a film version in 1999. Johnny Depp played Ichabod as a detective. The horseman was a vengeful ghost controlled by a witch. Mystery, horror, Gothic atmosphere. But again, the ambiguity was removed. We knew what was real. We knew what happened. Most adaptations do this. They resolve the uncertainty. They give us the satisfaction of knowing. But Irving's genius was refusing to do that, was leaving us hanging, was trusting that uncertainty could be more powerful than certainty. Sleepy Hollow is a real place. The town officially changed its name from North Tarrytown to Sleepy Hollow in 1996. Every Halloween, the town celebrates with festivals, ghost tours, performances. You can visit the old Dutch church. You can see the bridge. You can walk through the burial ground. Thousands make the pilgrimage every year, wanting to stand where Ichabod stood, wanting to connect with the legend, and the mystery remains. 200 years later, countless readers, endless debates. Did the Headless Horseman kill Ichabod Crane? Did Brom Bones murder him? Did Ichabod survive and flee? We'll never know. Irving made sure of that. And that's what makes it brilliant. That's what makes it endure. That's what makes it American. Because America is a place where reinvention is possible, where the past can be rewritten, where legend and reality blur. Ichabod Crane vanished into legend, and legend is more powerful than fact. Every autumn, when leaves fall and darkness comes early, when pumpkins appear on doorsteps and the boundary between summer and winter grows thin, the Headless Horseman rides again, through Sleepy Hollow, through American imagination, through 200 years of storytelling, searching for his head, or for his next victim, or for whatever it is that ghosts search for when they ride through the darkness. And somewhere on dark roads, men vanish without explanation, leaving only questions, only legends, only stories we can never verify. What do you think happened to Ichabod Crane? Do you believe in the Headless Horseman? Do you think Brom Bones got away with murder? Or do you think the truth is something else entirely? Something we can't even imagine, because Irving only gave us fragments? Leave your theory in the comments. Join the debate that's been going on for 2 centuries. If this exploration of America's most famous ghost story moved you, if you believe these classic tales deserve to be understood in their original, ambiguous form, please subscribe to the Midnight Archives. Your support helps us continue exploring the darkness that lives at the heart of our most beloved stories. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and remember, some mysteries are never meant to be solved, and sometimes the most American thing you can do is live with uncertainty. Welcome to the Midnight Archives, where pumpkins can be weapons, where legend becomes more real than truth, and every dark road leads to a question with no answer.